Welcome to Vintage SF. My name is Chris.
And I'm Richard, and we're here in a liminal space.
We're at the Petrified National Monument just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And behind us, you can see some of the art left by people hundreds and hundreds of years ago on these rocks.
I'm here in Albuquerque with Chris from Liminal Spaces. He's been kind enough to show us around today here in Albuquerque. We have an amazing book haul. I'm sure that you're going to be showing in the future, and I will show on my channel in the future.
Absolutely.
And just was a really fun day together. And Chris, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about liminal spaces.
Sure.
In some ways, a liminal space seems to be where it's a very thin space between our reality and some other, perhaps spiritual, but perhaps other in science fiction, other realm.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about liminal spaces as a name for your channel and what you're thinking there?
Yeah, so the way I learned about liminal spaces, of course, was kind of early in college. And it's interesting just thinking about liminal spaces because recently, because of a YouTube video phenomenon, I think I wish my daughter was here. She'd tell me exactly how I'm getting this wrong. They did something called the Backrooms, which has created or has made it so the term liminal is really well known to everybody, and I think that's really amazing. But I first discovered it in college when I was studying works of fantasy. And we were looking specifically, we started with Alice in Wonderland, where we talked about the concept that the rabbit hole is this tunnel, this link between two different worlds, right? Wonderland and the regular world that we're used to. And then we looked at it in Narnia, and we talked about the link there. And you can find in a lot of fantasy books these liminal spaces where people have to go through. Even in places like Harry Potter, which is a different structure of fantasy because he doesn't go to another world, but he does, in a sense, learn of a world within the world that he didn't know about it. And in that case, Diagon Alley becomes this kind of liminal space between regular London and the wizarding world where people go through to get to, or even platform 9 3/4 could be considered really, truly a liminal space. Yeah. And of course we took it farther from there, but for spatial, that's kind of what I've always considered liminal spaces. When you go through a tunnel and you feel like you've come out into a new world on the other end, that's a liminal space. And it's something that we all experience whenever we go through barriers, is the only way I can think about it. Like the Japanese create special red gates called torii, that if you walk under them, you have officially entered the world of the sacred. You've left the profane and you've walked into the world of the sacred. And I think they have...
So that's at all their temples, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the gate going in.
Yeah, and I think that they did that in England too. They had a certain thing you'd walk under when you'd go into the churchyard. I might be wrong about that. British viewers, let us know.
Yes, please do.
Because I might be wrong. There's a name for this gate. We'll see if I'm way off on that. But anyway, yeah, these humans make these spaces all the time, and I really like literature that plays around with these spaces. Science fiction does it a lot. Going into the mind, going into through space. You're going to read Contact soon. Can I bring that up?
You can definitely bring that up.
Okay. You're going to read Contact soon, and I mean, talk about a liminal space that this is kind of a spoiler. I'm assuming everybody's seen that movie.
Yeah.
But there's a huge liminal space in that.
True. Let's just leave it at that for now.
Yeah. So,
and you'll find out why I'm going to talk about Contact in the future as well. It's actually connected to the visit here, something I did along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then horror, I'll just add, does liminal spaces all the time too. If you think of the big one, of course, is Danielewski's House of Leaves, which I've talked about on the channel before, and I think Media Death Cult's about to do a big video on that. But that house growing on the inside, and they go spelunking into closets, that's all liminal spaces. So you can find, in speculative fiction, we'll call it, this concept of liminality is all throughout it, and that doesn't even touch on the aspect of liminality in human development and growth, which is a whole nother way we can look at liminality with, rites of passages and pregnancy being a liminal time. It's such a huge concept, and one that just really connected with me.
Now, we're sitting in your library here, and people will definitely see the DAW books that are here.
Yeah, there's my DAWs.
Yeah, and so many other science fiction books. But what I found interesting is when you started your channel, you really hadn't read very much science fiction at all. You want to explain how all of a sudden Liminal Spaces became a science fiction channel?
Yeah, so you've seen the rest of the library. So the science fiction corner we have going on.
This is actually quite a big room. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. So I've always been a voracious reader, but when I started this channel, I decided I wanted the most kind of mind-bending, fun, liminal fiction that I could find, and I knew it had to be science fiction. And that's not even true. I dabbled with horror, going back into horror, but I found that science fiction is really where it's at. So what I did is just started picking up stuff at book sales and yard sales and estate sales whenever I saw it and putting it on the shelf. And I didn't know really much about science fiction at all, so I'd just be like, that is a science fiction writer. And then slowly over time, I started watching BookTube and taking stuff out that I knew wasn't really up my alley, wasn't what I was looking for, thinning down the library. And then really, truly, I don't think I would have made this channel without Jason, my brother, pushing me, because I was... My original plan for we had lots of plans for this channel. It was going to be a music channel, but it was going to be about music based on literature. And then I was going to just do all of my favorite books, no matter what the genre, but I was going to do these long essays and not show my face or anything, just read these essays. And then finally, Jason was just like, dude, sit down, don't worry about saying and record this video. And that's what started it. And honestly, I started the channel because of this book. I listened to it on the way up to Colorado to see my brother, and I just started talking about the stories in this book because they were all so good.
This video is going to be coming out after a video, I believe, between us talking about one of the stories from the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. Mimsy were the... We made a video together about one of the stories from this book. Mimsy were the Borogoves. And this is by Lewis Paget, who is actually Henry Kuttner, and C.L. Moore, his wife Catherine Louise Moore. So you can find that on his channel. I'll put a link in my description for this video too. So now Jason has moved on. He has a full-time job. So you've taken over. This is primarily now sort of a literature channel, right? I mean, you occasionally will talk about TV shows and movies that are connected to it.
Connect to the books,
Yeah. So this is an excellent channel, by the way. If you haven't tuned in, you definitely should check it out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So one of the things I would guess with Liminal Spaces is you might kind of find some interesting authors that explore this in science fiction as well. Do you want to talk about perhaps a time period or some authors that in particular you're attracted to?
Yeah, I found that for me, most of the real weird liminal ideas come from the new wave. And it's so weird to talk about the new wave because I really tried to get into Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions and found that the American new wave didn't, at least through the eyes of that anthology, didn't sit as well with me. I think what Michael Moorcock was doing with, what is it, SF...
with New Worlds.
New Worlds.
Yes.
What Michael Moorcock was doing with New Worlds was really where you're going to find the stranger, more liminal sci-fi. It's hard because I feel like, okay, so I'm only going to read new wave science fiction, but just reading this, the Golden Age is incredible. It's the vibrant ideas that come out. So there's so much going for each of these times, but the way that I really dove into it is kind of strange. I love a book by a Japanese writer called Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. It's by Haruki Murakami, who's really known as kind of a literary writer. But this, in my opinion, is the most Dickian science fiction story to come after Philip K. Dick. It's wild. Really wonderful story about towns and brains and what's real and what's not real, and this person shuffles data from one side of the brain. It's just all the weirdness that we look for, and I've always loved that novel, and I was reading about his influences for that novel, and they listed Roger Zelazny's The Dream Master. And so I read Roger Zelazny's The Dream Master, and that was exactly kind of what I was looking for. And then I just started kind of grabbing more and more books. At first I focused specifically on that trope, on psychologists either going into people's subconscious or messing with people's subconscious. I looked for that trope, and I think between me and the viewers, we've like marked everything that falls into that trope. And now I just kind of, I know certain writers to look for, and I listen to a lot of other booktubers, you guys, to help me decide what I think would be liminal, would be good for the channel, if that makes sense.
And I think that you've gone beyond liminal too. It's liminal spaces and more, really, in terms of you're finding science fiction that appeals in different ways, not just liminal ways.
Right. Yeah. I just like the stuff that is not difficult but challenging. That to read it you have to kind of put clues together and that kind of stuff. I really enjoy a reading experience that I can participate in. Yeah. That makes it really fun, I think.
Yeah. And I think you also come with a creative writing background and a literature background, especially in myth and fairy tales, etc.
Yeah.
And so that really ties in with the background knowledge you have to these science fiction stories. It really becomes valuable to understand where some of these themes and currents may be coming from.
Right. Yeah, and I just am enjoying like a lot of people have been reading this for so long, and I'm just kind of like grabbing whatever and reading it, and it's fun to me. It's all very new. So I think to a lot of people, some of this stuff can be very dated stuff they read when they were kids, and I'm just like, whoa. Like Murray Leinster's story in this, of First Contact, is probably the most science fiction-y story ever. But the first time I read it, I was just blown away. It seemed so new. And a lot of times science fiction can seem dated, especially if you're talking about the way people treat each other. But man, these ideas, some of them just, I mean, we're talking about Mimsy, we're the Borogoves. It's a very hard word to say. That's a killer idea right now.
From 1953.
Yeah, 43.
43.
Yeah, 1943. That is a great idea, and that's I think the fun is discovering these ideas that people had so long ago that were, I mean, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, something I read way before this science fiction journey, and him going so far into the future that there's just like beaches and crabs, and I remember reading that just like, wow, it feels fresh still. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
No.
So one of the books that I've read this year is Neuromancer by William Gibson, and it's considered one of the major works of cyberpunk. And we're looking at, for that book was 1984. He was imagining being able to jack into a computer and have this alternate world that now we are starting to develop here in our world, in our time. Is that something that you might consider a liminal space, or what would you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I I mean, absolutely, the concept of virtual reality is going from our world to a liminal world. And it's funny because you'd have to think, like, what is this space? Is it the jack? How do they put it in that? Like, yeah, it makes it hard to track down the physical space, but there is a space. There is a veil between the virtual world and our world. And it's funny that you bring up Neuromancer, because the reason I read Dream Master by Zelazny is because I read an interview with Murakami where people kept saying that he was influenced by Neuromancer. Because I think he wrote Hardboiled Wonderland in '84 as well. And he said, no, because really, truly, and I don't know why it's not talked about more in science fiction, but that is kind of a cyberpunk. Like they've split this person's brain surgically so that he can shuffle and encrypt data from one side of his brain to the other. Really wild stuff. But yeah, it's that linked me to Zelazny and kind of went around the Neuromancer, just because a lot of people thought that was connected. I think virtual, and we even had to be careful on the channel, because when I was doing Dream Machine as a trope, if we broadened the definition too much, it became virtual reality.
Right.
And then you have the Matrix, and then you have, in fact, that book that I just gave you. Yeah. Lawrence Manning, The Man Who Awoke. That was written in 1932 and has a section where humanity is in a factory plugged into machines that give them their wildest desires at all times. It was the Matrix in the 30s. It's incredible how many things, if we broaden the definition too much, we can put into this concept. But yeah, I find that the concept of virtual reality is absolutely liminal. It's traveling from one world to another.
Yeah.
And I've never read Neuromancer. It's on my list.
I really appreciate you spending some time here on my channel.
Yeah.
And it's been really great getting to know Chris in a present real world, not in the liminal world of the internet, connecting that way.
Yeah.
So do check his channel out. It's an awesome channel. And Chris, you're such a great host. Thank you so much for hosting my wife and I.
You bet. Thank you very much for coming and stopping by. That was really fun.
And I'm not sure, do you remember what my sign-off is usually? Until next time.
Keep reading.
You got it. All right.
That's great. That was cool. Yeah.